Welcome everyone for a review of an old DOS game from 1994. Now what we're looking at here is called Arcy 2. It was developed by Software Ulm, which is a German design team. And it's basically a real-time puzzle game. Now the main deal about this game is that you're this little smiley face and you have to collect all the keys in order to open the door and then reach the door to exit the stage. Now this game has actually 3 parts, so to speak. They are 3 games. Now each of those has, as far as I know, 20 levels, 20 puzzles. I've only played the first part now, and I will also only review the first part. Now this game is a real curiosity because it's really hard to find. The game itself not very hard, but any information about the developers, the design team, producers, anything like that is really hard to find. If anyone knows anything more about the design team behind this game, please share it with me. I would be really interested to know what happened to those people and who they were. Now something we have to keep in mind with this game is that it is very basic and very old school for its time. Because in 1994 we've had other really big titles launching like XCOM, Doom 2, The Elder Scrolls Arena, the first one in the series, Mortal Kombat 2 and System Shock. So Arcy 2 is a really niche indie kind of oddity game that even at that time was probably not really known. In terms of performance, it's actually a word you don't really hear a lot when talking about old DOS games nowadays, because we assume that our systems are very capable of handling those games nowadays. Now, I still had a little difficulty with performance in this game. Namely, the moment there are many animations going on, especially the water sprite animation. I don't know what exactly is going on in terms of programming and the code, but it actually lowers the frame rate. This little game somehow manages to have my frame rate drop when there's water animation going on. Since the game is all about puzzles, and the more thinky way of approaching a game, you may be wondering if it really is challenging and if it really does make good use of the element it provides in solving puzzles. Now the first thing we notice is that compared to something like Pac-Man, there are quite a few elements going on, and they provide for quite a variety of puzzles you could experience. There's actually a little help screen at the beginning that you can actually access also in-game to figure out what kind of objects and elements have what purpose and what they do. But while looking at all those pretty interesting elements, there is one positive note I have to add and one negative. The positive note is, for the most part, they all have really different mechanics and they function differently, work differently, and provide a different gameplay experience in terms of puzzles and what you can expect from the puzzle. So in that sector it is really rich, and it would provide for hundreds of puzzles in the combination of all those unique puzzle gameplay elements. However, the game makes almost no use of those. Now, I am aware that this is just part 1 of 3 parts, and I've only briefly looked into part 2 and part 3, which actually do make quite a lot of use of the other elements and good combinations of the elements for puzzles. But part 1 really feels more like a little showcase of the elements, the entire concept, and some very simple and not too challenging puzzles. Now I think that was also the strategy behind the entire development team. because in the main menu you can actually see the section Read This, and if you click on that one, you will actually see that they advertise the other two parts of the game for a pretty high price to buy additionally. There are some problems I have with how the puzzles are designed. One problem is, from this selection of over a dozen different elements and objects, usually there are about 3 or 4 of them on the screen at the same time. That is good in one way, because it doesn't make it a real mess and chaos, but in another way it also really simplifies how you have to think about the puzzle. So there's never really that big planning phase where you have to maybe sit there and look at the screen for 2 minutes to figure out how do I even start the puzzle. Secondly, many of those stages, levels, puzzles, whatever, are very interestingly designed in ways that you have this entire machine, this apparatus going on that solves itself once you obviously done the correct things, as with pretty much every puzzle. But the balance is a little bit on the, I call it, server side, because you usually require very little ingenious and complex actions to perform in order for the apparatus to start doing its magic. Instead, you have to pull off one tiny thing and you see a chain of very complex and cool events going on. So, especially for part 1, I think that the game and level designers had a lot more fun with making something that is fun to design than something that is fun to actually play. There are some interesting mechanics that require a little bit of out-of-the-box strategic thinking, like you can actually have enemies squashed and explode in order to break walls, but that's just one little cherry on top of your cake. You very quickly start to notice that many of those gameplay elements only appear in maybe 1 or 2 puzzles out of 20, and that is very sad because they don't make proper use of those puzzle elements. As said, part 2 and part 3 may make more use of those. Oh, and another thing. The music keeps looping all the time. You will be hearing The Entertainer from Scott Joplin on a 8-bit MIDI tune for about 1 hour. So yeah, better like that one, because it'll probably get stuck in your head for hours, days, nights. Since this is a real-time game, you do have those moments when you feel, okay, I have to move over there and trigger this, but then I have to rush like hell in order to trigger the other stuff and not die in the process. So it does have action elements in it that require dexterity and fast thinking and reactions. I think that little twist adds to a very special feeling in terms of puzzle that otherwise would probably serve a rather boring game by comparison. From my personal experience, the balance on the difficulty of the puzzles is also really all over the place. There are some puzzles that required me to think and experiment for literally 15 minutes or plus, while as others were so straightforward that from the first moment I saw it to the end, only like 5 or 10 seconds passed, literally. And the peculiar thing about that one is, it's not even chronological. Sometimes really simple puzzles come way at the end of the game. It gives the game a little bit of a weird vibe. Other very peculiar elements are, there are quite often elements that you think you might have to use them in the puzzle, but you never actually get any chance to ever interact with them. In some puzzles there's also a little bit of a principle going on that says, I have no idea what's going on, so I'm just gonna try the first possible move I can make. And very often that actually works in solving the puzzle. Now there's a little bit of personal background going on as to why I'm reviewing this game in particular for the first ever review. It was actually the first ever video game I've ever played, at least that I can remember. Prior to this, there was no Game Boy, no video game systems, no Windows 95, nothing except for some black and white, shareware, freeware, casual Macintosh games. So this has an extremely strong nostalgia factor, and even though the game may fall really short when analyzing and reviewing it, it was kind of the entire god of games back then, and also very strongly influenced how I like to look at games, probably even to today. So I'm eternally grateful for this game. For me personally, that was the gateway to computer gaming. So I hope you could do anything with this review. It's actually quite fun to play. I provide the links for the entire game in the description below. Use something like DOSBox. I also provide links for that one in the description below. And well, enjoy gaming. Give it a try if you want, and otherwise, have fun, guys.